That's the first thing, is that understand there's two different definitions. Once I look at the interstate operation and know that the threshold is over 10,000 pounds, and that's the biggest problem the industry has, is that you can't separate the idea between a DOT driver and a DOT vehicle and a vehicle that requires a CDL.
Yo, what is going on YouTube? My name is Josh with American AF Dumpsters here in Dallas. And today we got a good one for you. I've got Santiago here with safety, compliance, and training. What's up,
Yeah.
man? So
What's going on,
Santiago
bud?
was at the Dumpster Expo, and he dropped so much knowledge that, well, actually, first of all, I found you, Santiago, on TikTok. I don't know if I even talked to you about that, but I found you on TikTok, and then that's when I was like, okay. Well, actually, you know what? I think someone recommended or
Yeah,
sent your
so it
TikTok to
was
me.
actually one of your buddies that commented. I think it might have been on your personal Facebook. I
Okay.
think his name was Eric. Because I was gonna remember to ask if he was at the expo, because I wanted to give him a shirt and a hat for record. So you put a post that said, like, does anybody know a retired
That's what it was.
DOT guy or whatever? And funny enough, I remember the one of the first comments was like, go check the local gay bar or something, and I absolutely laughed at that because I thought it was hilarious. But
Okay.
in that thread, I think your buddy's name is Eric. He's the one that he typed my at company page name in there,
Okay.
and that, yeah, that's the way that that the connection was made. I don't remember his. I think that's his name. I'm not. I'd have to go back and look, but that's the way that that we were connected.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Now you say that, that completely reminds me. Yeah. Somebody recommended you, and then I started following and found your videos, and I'm like, okay. I'm going through your videos, like, okay, I like this. This is kind of stuff that we absolutely need. But yeah, why don't you tell us everybody a little bit about yourself, your website, your information, what you got, what you actually do, besides piss some people off, I guess, right? Who don't want to hear
Yeah.
what you got to say.
So yeah, so I've been kind of involved around DOT compliance for about 20 years now. I was a trooper here in Texas for I was in law enforcement for 7 years, and the majority of that time I was a trooper on the DOT side,
Hmm.
down in Del Rio, Eagle Pass areas where I was at. And back in 2012, I got recruited by a trucking company to be their DOT guy. I mean, it's kind of long story, but that's the way that the transition happened. I never expected it to happen as early as it did, because it's always been understood that most guys that spend 25 years with the state retire and then go learn how to do the trucking compliance on the company side. For me, it just happened a lot sooner. But I didn't know at the time that it was kind of the path that God was painting for me, which led me to the position I'm in now. But after I started working on the company side, spent the next 8 years with a few companies working, learning how this stuff works, and I also duly transitioned to becoming a safety guy. So, like I talked at the expo, I can recite and talk about OSHA workplace compliance rules just like I can with the DOT stuff. And after I kind of gained like a very solid base foundation of knowledge, I felt like I could open up my own business and become a consultant. And that's what I did back in 2019. Going into 2020, May of 2020, I got laid off from my full time job at that time as a corporate safety director for a company out of Houston. And that's kind of the start period that I hold, even though it was September of 19 when I actually filed for my business name.
Mm.
But that was the goal, was how do I share what I've learned over the last, at that time, 15 years, from working 7 years in enforcement to 8 years on the company side, and just share that knowledge. And I also knew at that time in 2019 December, and then even to kind of pandemic lockdown times, that's when I had actually started working on the DOT compliance manager course that I'm known for now, because I knew there was a gap in the industry where someone needed to bridge the gap between what was factual law and what people thought was the way it was. And when I used to Google or even try to search for like DOT training back then, it was really hard to find, and it was always out of state. And every time I looked at a syllabus or anything else, it kind of always looked like it was just a, hey, I'm going to read you the green and white book, and that's it. And that wasn't my focus. Was the person that's sitting in an office every day having to learn how to do this stuff, because that was me. And that's kind of how it all came about. And I started the I so the first year I was kind of just consulting, and then the first class I ever gave was the first time I offered my class for people to attend was the last week of January in 2021, and there was 5 students in that class, and I was excited, because I was hoping by the end of the year to hope like have 20, at least 20 students by the end of the year. But at that time, my main focus was still doing the contract work. um, and then within a few months, I started to get asked more and more about doing the course, and what what I was hoping to have 20 turned into 132 at the end of the year.
Wow.
And that it was around June that year that I realized maybe this is the better route. It kind of worked out at the same time, because I also recognized that when you're a contractor for a company, you're not able to really solidify anybody's compliance because you're not there every day.
Hmm.
And I knew that the bigger impact I could make is, let me train one of your employees to do this the right way with whatever the law says, instead of me trying to contract with you when I know that I was humble enough to know there's no way that I can fix your stuff. And that led to a position where now a lot of people recognize that their third parties that they have hired they're not delivering what they promised. And I know that firsthand, because I saw how unrealistic it is to make sure someone's program is 100% ready to go when you're not in their office every day. And instead of being selfish and just saying, well, you know what, I'm just going to contract. And I didn't have a problem getting people to contract me with my background, but I knew that I'm also kind of screwing them. And how am I helping the industry by, screwing this company out of thousands of dollars a month to somewhat help move their program in the right direction, but not as quick as it should, because I'm not there every day.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's kind of how it started out. And now I think I'm about maybe 7 or 8 students away from hitting 600.
Nice.
And yeah, the 5-year anniversary will be in January of when I actually started offering that class. And that just turned into, people reaching out to ask for other topics. And because I never imagined I'd be doing more than just that class, but then it led to me doing the vehicle brake inspector training, which has become kind of popular now for me, where people are wanting to learn real in-depth the equipment standards, and everything that gets checked for in a level 1, because that's essentially what that class is I spend 2 days explaining the regulations for equipment, compare it to what it says in the out of service, and then on the third day we go outside and walk around a truck and trailer for hours, just so that you can see, like, hey, when I'm talking about the where you check for the tread depth or whatever, whatever we're talking about in class.
Right.
And then a hazmat course, and then, like I told you earlier, that audit course. So I kind of just have these trainings available as a reputable way for people to see, like, this is what the law says, and this is the way that you're supposed to do it. But I also know, because I spent longer on your side than I did when I went in uniform. So they just became the best of both worlds for me, because everybody that's come to class knows I'm going to teach them the actual law, which is what I was trained to enforce by the government. But I can also explain how to implement it and follow it, because I actually worked on their side. And that's what I think is always separated, and why I think I've been able to relate to the students so much, because I was in their shoes, and there's no way I can teach you how to do something that I never did. And I really believe that's the reason that I've had, almost 600 students in less than 5 years, which, again, I was hoping to have 20 at the beginning of the first year I did it. And now with as much reviews and kind of the little bit of following I have now, people have started to see, okay, like this guy's, he's trying to teach us the right stuff, and that's what I've done with all social media posts and whatever else is, I'm just trying to like say, okay, if you get stopped, like here's what the law actually says. And in a sense, I'm actually trying to help people like, hey, don't let DOT write you up for these things that aren't actually law. Like, and let me show you where it says it. But like anything else, man, you're gonna have 70% that support and understand, and then 30% that just argue because they just have it, they just have it glued in their mind that what they think is what it actually says. And
Right.
I'm sure you've encountered this, but people don't like to be proven wrong, and they kind of take the wrong approach. And I bet just like you, man, as soon as one of my videos gets posted, I have to turn the notifications off because I mean I'll maybe see like one or two comments, and then I just got to get out of there because otherwise I'd be arguing all day long.
Well,
Um,
and the thing with DOT is like it's all there. It's all black and white. It's just everybody has their own interpretations of it, which is crazy because what a lot of times they believe is fact. There's so much misinformation out there, and that's one of the main reasons why I did want a DOT guy at the show, because there's so much misinformation, and it's not even misinformation. Sometimes it's just the wrong geographic information, right? I mean, there's people from other states that think just because it's like that in their state, well, it's like that in Texas or Florida or California or wherever they're from. So I do have some like most commonly asked questions or most commonly debated issues in our industry and the dumpster rental industry, and I'd like to touch on some of those with you if you don't mind.
no, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Cool. So one of the first ones, one of the main ones that everybody always asks is as far as because you know how you saw at the show the different types of trucks. Some of the guys have pickup trucks and trailers. Some of the guys have roll off trucks, and some of the guys have the big tandem trucks, and then single axles, and you name it. So one of the biggest debated and hottest topics in our industry is whether or not a pickup truck and a trailer need uh, whether the driver needs a CDL and whether the truck needs to be and the company needs to be under DOT. So can you verify or can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the way that it works is there's only two types of commerce that you can be classified into. It's either interstate or intrastate.
Right.
And the problem that comes with and this is actually why being regulated and CDL are the first two topics in my course, the two most misunderstood concepts in all of trucking, not just dumpster, it's in everything, the entire trucking industry. Is everybody thinks that it's only a semi tractor trailer that's a DOT regulated vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to look at it with a different mindset. You got to look at the difference between a vehicle and driver that's DOT regulated and a driver and a vehicle that are required a CDL because they're not actually the same thing. How that's evidential is the definition for a regulated vehicle under the general applicability is in 390.5, which is where commercial motor vehicle is defined. And in that definition is where you read in bullet number one, whether it's a combination or single vehicle that has a gross vehicle weight rating or gross weight of 10,001 pounds or more. And the definition for CDL is in 383.5, where the first bullet for a Class A talks about a vehicle, a combination that has a gross vehicle weight rating or gross weight or gross combination weight rating or gross combination weight of 26,001 pounds or more with a towed unit over 10,000 pounds. So that's the first thing is that's the difference. The general applicability definition in 390.5 explains when a vehicle is regulated in interstate commerce. The definition for a commercial motor vehicle in 383.5 is where it defines when a vehicle needs a CDL because they're not the same thing. So every vehicle, whether you're driving a Kenworth T500, a Chevy 3500, a GMC Yukon, a Toyota Camry, every vehicle has to have a gross vehicle weight rating that's required by NHTSA because they're the ones who govern the way that vehicles are built here in the U.S. under the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards in Chapter 571 of Title 49 CFR Transportation. So the bigger the vehicle, the higher that number is going to be. The problem is that people don't understand the difference between gross vehicle weight rating, gross weight, registered weight, and allowable weight, which is kind of the reason that you reached out and wanted to have this discussion. In the definition, the two weight methods it addresses is the GVWR, the gross vehicle weight rating, and the gross weight. The gross vehicle weight rating for power units, you'll find on the sticker on the door of your power unit, right, where your VIN number is and other identifying vehicle, the year and model and stuff. Or the make, the year and make and all that info. Your nadir sticker is what they call it. Now, what it tells us is that, or when you read the definition for gross vehicle weight rating, it's simply just a number that is the manufacturer specifies that number as a loaded weight of that vehicle plus the vehicle itself. It doesn't mean you can actually carry that much weight. It's just the number that they assign. So, for example, a half-ton pickup like a Ram 1500 or a Ford F-150, that usually has a weight rating of 7,000 pounds. When you get into the three-quarter tons, F-250s, Chevy 2500s, GMC 2500, now we're looking at 10,000 to 11,000, maybe 11.5 on the high end. When you get to the 1 tons, now we're looking at 14,000 to 14.5 to 15,000. So the bigger the vehicle, the more it's rated for, which is makes sense. So when you get to semi-sized vehicles like a Peterbilt 389 3-axle split with a sleeper, always has a GVWR assigned to it as 52,000 pounds. It doesn't mean the truck weighs 52 grand. If it did, you couldn't even pull a trailer or load with it. So that's the first thing you got to understand, is that's just a number assigned by the manufacturer. That's all it is. So in the definition though, in 390.5, it says we can use either the gross vehicle weight rating or the gross weight, whichever is higher. Gross weight means what you actually weigh, which is the only way you can get that is by being put on scales. So if I pull you over and let's say that your stickers say 8,000 pounds, but I put you on the scales and on the scales you're 10,500, well, I got you now because we can use whichever of the two is higher.
Mm-hmm.
And that's either in a combination or in a single vehicle that's in interstate commerce and it's over 10,000 pounds. But that's where the federal definition is stated, and that applies across the entire U.S. So it doesn't matter in what mode of interstate transportation you are, that threshold of 10,000 doesn't change. Where it does change, though, is when you stay in your own state. Like for us in Texas, that definition for us is found in Texas Administrative Code 4.11, which is the applicability for us. And in there, in paragraph A, you read that in order to be intrastate DOT regulated, you have to meet a threshold of exceeding 26,000 pounds. But that's only for Texas. Most states use 26,000, but not all of them do. For example, Colorado uses 16,000 pounds. California and Indiana use 10,000 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Us, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana, we all use over 26,000 pounds when you're intrastate. So that's again, but that's to be regulated. Now, what does it mean to be regulated? Once you're DOT regulated, that's when you need to have a US DOT number. That's when you need to have a medical card. That's when you need to have the markings on the side, your fire extinguisher, your triangles, your logbook, keep a track of your hours on a timesheet. Like, you're subject to the general applicability. But just because you're subject to general applicability doesn't automatically mean you need a CDL. Because when we read the definition for CDL, we're going to use the same two weight methods, but the difference is that a Class A you need when you're in a combination over 26,000 pounds and your towed unit is over 10, which is again either by the ratings, so the sticker on the truck and the sticker on the door of the truck and the sticker on the trailer is over 26,000 pounds in combination, and your tow unit is over 10, you need a Class A. It's funny, man. Like, I could take the average truck driver on the road right now that's in a tractor trailer. I could pull him out and ask him, hey, why does this need a Class A? And I would bet you 19 out of 20 wouldn't be able to tell me. And that might actually be a high percentage. Um, Most of them don't even understand why they need a CDL. But it's because it meets the definition of CDL under 383.5. So when I look at, let's say, for example, what I was talking about at the expo is when you got, let's say, for your a typical scenario, you got an F-250 at a 10,000 pound gross vehicle weight rating with one of your dumpster trailers, let's say that's rated 8,000 pounds, 10 and 8 is 18,000. So if I go across state lines, I'm over 10, so therefore I'm DOT regulated. So I need to have medical card, extinguisher, triangles, log, e-log, all the general DOT stuff.
Yep.
But I don't need a CDL because I don't meet the definition of a CDL under 383 because they're not always the same. And I'll give you an example. The government entities are exempt from the general applicability. So for example, here in San Antonio, a belly dump driver for Bexar County doesn't need to have a logbook, doesn't need US DOT number, doesn't need to have markings, can have as dark window tint as they want because the general applicability doesn't apply to them. However, government entities aren't exempt from a CDL.
Mm.
Therefore, that driver still needs to have a Class A, just like a regular driver, but he's exempt from the general applicability because there's a specific exemption for government entities. So in that case, you have a driver that is not DOT regulated, but is required a CDL. In the example I gave you, you have a driver that is DOT regulated, but doesn't need a CDL. And that's the problem is that everybody thinks when they think DOT, all they think about is tractor trailer, 18 wheels. That's not the way it works. You have to and that's why those two discussions are the very first part of my course because that's the most misunderstood concept is not understanding that there's a difference between the two. Um, and in either case, so you got to remember, just because you're not over by the sticker weight doesn't mean we can't put you on the scales. And if you're over by the scaled weight, then I still got you because we can use one or the other. Does that make sense? And that's why I explained that's why we have scales. It's not just to try to weigh the belly dumps and the end dumps that are hauling bulk. We're also using them to try to say like, well, you know what? I know you're not over by the sticker, but let me put you on the scales and see if you're actually carrying enough to be regulated or be required a CDL. And but yeah, that's the way that it actually works. Those are two completely separate concepts. DOT driver versus CDL driver are not the same thing.
So, just so there was a lot said there, and I'm gonna make sure that when you are mentioning those the sections or the what do you call them, the articles or
The regulation
the
code?
regulations, I want to make sure I add those onto the video here as well. But when
Sure.
you're just to be clear, interstate and intrastate. If I am crossing state lines, that immediately puts me under federal regulations, which means anything over 10,000 pounds, the truck needs
Is DOT
is
regulated?
DOT regulated.
Yeah.
If I stay in Texas, if I completely stay in Texas, I don't go to Oklahoma. Nobody wants to go to Oklahoma anyways. But I don't go to Louisiana. I don't go anywhere else. If my radius is strictly in Texas, I have a pickup truck, a 10,000 pound F-250 or 2,500, and a 16K GVWR trailer. Puts me at 26,000 pounds exactly. And I stay in Texas. I do not need a CDL, and my company, and I'm not DOT regulated.
You're not regulated, no, because
Correct.
you have to be over that threshold. And I'll give you an example, like a lot of like a 16-foot box truck, those usually have right at a 26,000 pound GVWR. But that doesn't mean I can't put it on scales if I think it might be over that. But until I got you over 26,000, either by the sticker weight or the gross weight, putting you on scales, that's when I would then require you would be regulated, and you would be required to see a Class B CDL because you're in a power unit over 26,000. So yeah, that's generally correct. Is that if you stay in Texas, just like I mentioned in that combination, an F-250 with your dumpster trailer, if you're 18,000 in combination and you stay in Texas, you're not regulated, and you still don't need a CDL
Right.
because you're not over 26,000 for CDL, and you're not over 26,000 to be regulated. It's once you cross the state lines that puts you in a different category.
I think that's what people they just get mixed up, and they want to argue because they want to they really want to make sure that they want to believe that they're in the right. You know what I'm saying? Even though again, it's all black and white. Another thing, like I've got a Class B CDL because I drive my big truck, my tandem truck. But with that Class B CDL, that doesn't mean I can go drive a 3500 with a 20-foot roll off or 20-foot dump truck if even if my uh, combined GVWR is over 26,000 pounds. So let me say that clearly. If I have an 11K truck and a
Sure.
20K trailer, that puts me at 31,000 pounds. My Class B CDL is still not good enough for that because
No.
I need to have a Class A because
Yep.
it's what do you call it? Help me explain this.
Because you're over the threshold. You're once you're in a combination over 26 and you're
Combination.
told you need over 10, then
Correct.
you need a Class A, and that's kind of the other misconception, right? So if I also then took the same 20 drivers and asked them, when do you need a CDL? I guarantee you 19 of them, if not all 20, are going to say when you have air brakes. So
Mm-hmm.
then my next question is, if that's the case, then how am I able to get a Class A in a hot shot?
Mm.
Because it's never been air brakes. It's always been weight.
Wait.
You can drive an air brake vehicle and not have a CDL. It's never air brakes have never been. They've only ever been a restriction, right? If I get my Class A in that hot shot, I can't drive a Class A that has air brakes because I'm going to be restricted. I'm going to have a restriction for non-air brake equipped CMBs.
Right. Right. Well, uh, that answers the interstate. Again, I know I got friends in Wisconsin, and they were trying to tell me anything over 10,000 pounds, you need to have a DOT, and I'm like, no, you in Wisconsin need to have a
You in
DOT
Wisconsin
probably.
because their intrastate applicability might be 10,000.
Hmm.
That doesn't work in Texas, and that's why it's again they have to understand that interstate is set, intrastate is depends on that state.
Right. The second you cross state lines, you're going under federal. As long as you
You're
stay in
going
your own
federal,
state,
yeah,
you better follow
yeah.
your own
Once
state
you're
rules.
interstate, then you go to 10,000.
Right.
You stay in your own state, you'd have to research what your state says, and this is one of the reasons that I don't claim to be a DOT expert because I don't know every state's
Mm.
intrastate rules. I just know ours because that's what I enforce.
Right.
And I mean, I've learned over time, from the students that I've had that come from out of state. I research their state law so I can help explain to them in class what works for them. And the only reason I knew Indiana is earlier this year I had a student from Indiana come down, and so I had to research his state. And once I saw that they use 10,000 intrastate, then every time I explained the concept, I'd say, hey Dylan, like remember for you, even if you're in a 1 ton in Indiana, you're still regulated. But for my students here in Texas, they're not because ours is 26,000 pounds. So yeah, that's where some of that confusion might come in that you get asked about or that you hear about.
Well, and it's again, it's some people are just they speak so sure about it because they're correct in their state, but they don't realize again it's different in every state. Um,
Right.
and so you got to be careful with what you hear and are told online because not everybody's an expert. And
Sure.
I know I'm not. I'm learning. You actually said something a minute ago that actually I didn't know about myself. You said something about even if the driver doesn't have a CDL, but the company requires is DOT regulated, the driver still has to have a medical card. I did not know that. I thought
Yeah.
the medical
So
card just applies to me, the driver, as my CDL, not the DOT company. So that's something that
yeah,
I
no.
just learned.
So the reason that that's required is that when you fall under general applicability, then 391, the chapter where the medical card's required, it comes into play. which is another sometimes difficult concept for my students, is because on day two, the morning of day two, I go through that part, driver qualifications, where they learn how to put their driver files together.
Mm-hmm.
But before I can teach them how to put their driver files together, they first have to understand who needs to have a file. And what most students come to class and what most of the industry does is they only have files for their CDL drivers. The problem is 391 applies to all regulated drivers, not just CDL drivers. So my driver in that 18,000 pound combination going across state lines would need to have a DOT driver file just like my CDL drivers do.
Interesting.
So that's another, and that's where the requirement for the medical card comes in. And like a quick example, just so you the easy example. The next time you see a two axle UPS truck or FedEx truck, look at the side and you're going to see the US DOT number stamped on the side. So you look at, well, why do they have it? It's because they're technically an interstate operation,
Mm.
but their drivers don't need to have a CDL because that little two axle truck isn't over 26,000 like you would need in your dumpster truck. Does that make sense? So
Right.
why does it have the numbers? Because it's regulated. Once it's regulated, that's when you got to have the number on there. And your driver needs a medical card, driver needs a file, and such. They have to be qualified under that chapter, just like your CDL drivers do.
Interesting. So, being an ex officer, pulling people over and issuing citations and all that stuff uh, for DOT violations, right? Like, what what can I do to make sure that hopefully stay off the DOT officer's radar? Kind of like just on my end, is there anything preventative that I can do other than a clean truck is a safe truck? I guess I think you hear a lot of people saying that, even though that's not really true all the time. But what can I do to hopefully avoid being a red flag to somebody like you that wants to pull people over, that wants to pull us over?
I think I'll tell you because I think actually this is what I think every company's problem is. And I think honestly, it's where all your problems begin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what I've used as an argument to this idea that foreign CDL drivers are a hazard. So when you look at the statistics for the US, there's about 4 million truck drivers in the US. If I remember the last time I looked, I think it was like 500,000 or less are actually foreign CDL holders, whether it's a Mexico CDL driver or a Canadian CDL driver. So everybody else is an American state CDL holder, truck driver. How many of those drivers that are the American truck drivers? How many of them do you think do an actual pre-trip?
Not many.
Not very many.
Right.
So when I get asked, what do I think is a real hazard? It's those drivers that take 2 minutes to do a pre-trip. But they don't want to have that discussion because the easy argument is, well, it's all these foreign drivers. We've allowed foreign drivers here for decades.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I ask somebody in the industry that makes that argument, okay, name me 5 crashes that have happened that was strictly due to the fact that someone didn't speak English. And they never can. But if you were to ask me, give me 5 crashes that have happened where it's equipment related, I could easily find them for you. And I think that's the biggest problems. I'm not so worried about that because that's not the reality. Now I 100% believe every driver should be able to speak English. I mean, I'm 100% in support of that. But that's not the biggest hazard. The hazard is the millions that do a 2-minute pre-trip and don't actually check their equipment and have a wheel fall off going down the road that hits a van and kills a family. That's the real hazard. But I think every company's problem, that's where it starts, because once your drivers aren't doing proper pre-trips, gets pulled over by the black and white, you start accumulating violation after violation after violation. And then at that point, that's what's going to get you audited. And if you don't have any corrective actions implemented to fix that problem, that's when they're going to shut you down. They're going to say, no, you're not doing adequate maintenance. So there's two parts to it. Obviously, is the maintenance that you're doing on your trucks, but then the inspections, and that's where it all starts for me. Is honestly is pre-trip, because when you don't do a thorough pre-trip and you have those violations going down the road, how are you going to explain that to me roadside? Especially when it's something simple like an empty fire extinguisher. Did that just happen right now? If so, where's all the powder in the truck? Or did you just not check it because you're used to doing just a 2 minute pre-trip? And I know, like, when drivers hear this, they're gonna get upset, but it's because it's the truth.
Right.
That's the biggest problem most companies have. And when you don't do it, you're gonna start accumulating those violations. So when I pull your truck over and I'm able to see your SMS profile, I'm gonna see, like, man, every time we pull you over, man, you got 8 violations, 10 violations, 12 violations. I'm probably gonna look at you a little more thorough than I would just a company that doesn't get inspected very much, or that doesn't have as many violations because they're not a constant problem. So that to me is probably the biggest one. And that whole clean truck, I don't believe that, because a dirty truck is a working truck.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't. A clean truck is, to me, like, that wasn't ever anything. I mean, and it doesn't take a trained eye, but when I'm gonna pull over a working truck, that's what I want to pull over. But yeah, I think, I mean, and that may not be everybody's perception, but that was mine. It was the appearance of the truck didn't matter. It was, you can have the cleanest truck, but the most horrible maintenance. I can put a fresh coat of paint on a hunk of junk. It doesn't make a difference. Um, but honestly, man, I think that's every company's biggest problem is pre-trips, is the failure of doing adequate pre-trips. And this year, man, like, this year I got asked to do way more private trainings covering pre and post trips than I have in every other year that I've been doing this, because most companies understand that's our biggest problem. And the thing that sucks, man, and it's something I've dealt with for 20 years, whether I was on the enforcement side or on this side, is drivers don't like to be told that they're not as knowledgeable as they think they are. Which, you as a CDL holder, you have a skill and a knowledge of a working knowledge of the truck that I will never have, because you actually do it. However, I also have a skill that you will never have because you weren't trained in the rules that govern your job as a driver. And that's always been the hardest thing for me to explain, is that in CDL school, the purpose of CDL school is to teach you how to drive, how to shift, how to turn, how to back up. We don't ever talk about any of that because that's not our job. Our job is everything that surrounds you driving this truck. And I think the problem, the biggest gap, is that drivers don't get an adequate, thorough explanation of what the regulations actually say for roadside inspection. And that's where, I mean, if they don't know what specifically is going to be looked for, then how do they themselves know what to check?
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to do with my videos, is just say, when you get pulled over roadside and I'm looking at your tire, here's what I'm going to check. And I'll say whatever it says in the tire section. But then I'll have a driver that asks me, and I'll just guess because it's a constant example. Well, doesn't the date on the tire also matter? Not for us. Maybe for you, that's something you'd want to take into account because you're driving it, but that's not something that you're going to read in regulation. The year of the tire doesn't matter to us. We're not looking at it. We're just looking at these things.
Hmm.
And that's what's always been hard for me to explain, is that, um, when we pull you over, we're not checking everything. There's a criteria that we're trained to follow. And in that class, I actually give it to them. And I ask them, okay, look on this list of stuff we check. Where is the fuel filter? Where is the air filter? Where is the oil? Where is the vacuum? Where is the dryer? You don't see it anywhere on there. Why? Because we don't check everything. We check these certain things, and that's it. And even that's gonna, people will argue against me because but it's true. Like we don't. That's not stuff we check. So pre-trips, man, that's your number one problem for sure. Because the accumulation of a bunch of inspections with a lot of violations, that's what's going to stand out to me more. The cleanliness of your truck doesn't matter because if you got clean trucks, but then when I run your history, every time you get pulled over, you got multiple violations. What good does your cleanness matter? So in all reality, it's actually your record, your public SMS profile, which every motor carrier has. That's publicly available. Anybody can view it.
So, walk me through real quick on you stop a vehicle or you run them through one of the safety checkpoints or whatever. Walk me through a normal, I guess you can say, if they're all if any of them are normal inspection, and then what red flags other than like you just mentioned about evidence of non pre-trip, but what why would you at what point would you inspect the vehicle further, right? Like, you're kind of overlooking things, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, this is a red flag. Let me look into more into this truck or the driver.
Um, I mean, I don't really think there's a specificness, but like I'll give you an example, and this is one that I've used multiple times. Is when and I have actually several examples of pictures I show in my training, but there's pictures I show you of a truck and trailer that I can point out 5 to 6 violations, and I haven't even pulled it over yet. Like this is me taking a picture of a vehicle in front of me that I already can see, and I haven't even stopped it. Those are the ones that I'm definitely going to be really thorough in. But I don't think there's a specific one. I mean, you can see several violations on any tractor trailer just by seeing it pass by or just by during the day. I mean, at night, obviously, when they got lights out, you can see that. But I don't think there's anything specifically. Now, once you start hearing those air leaks, the heavy air leaks, and hey, I'm having to turn my ignition back on to get my reservoir back up just so I can measure your steer axle brakes. Those are definitely things that are probably going to stick out to me where I'm like, man, you got some compressor problems or you got an air leak, a heavy air leak somewhere because you shouldn't have to be airing up you shouldn't have to be turning on your truck to fill up your reservoirs multiple times in this 20, 30-minute inspection. With the truck off, you should be able to maintain, most of your pressure. Um, but I'd say that probably air leaks. And I mean, obviously, if you see things like an engine drenched in oil, power steering, stuff like that. I mean, yeah, you think, oh man, this probably has some more maintenance issues. But I'd say that I would say that the majority of violations that we discover should have all been found by the drivers, like
Mm.
100%. I tell them that every time I train in a group of them, because one of the hardest questions for me not really hard question for me to answer, but very subjective question that I get is, what is a proper pre-trip? Well, for me, in my opinion, a proper pre-trip to me is everything that I find in a level 2, you should be able to find too. Especially if you believe you're so educated as a CDL driver. And if I'm able to find it, especially at my height, how are you not able to find it? But that's where the problem of the gap in the information that isn't shared and isn't instructed in CDL school. Because I guarantee you, what we're taught to check as far as the tire goes, you probably weren't told all of that in detail when you went through CDL school.
Right.
Some of it you pick up on, like just over experience and stuff that you guys get. But unless you actually just took the time to read the same regulation I was trained in, then you would actually know. That's one of the other reasons I started using the book in my videos. If you notice, like I started out just talking, and then in the last several ones, you'll see I'm always referencing the book because when I say something, I want to show you also. I don't want to just say it, because that's one of the biggest problems this industry has. Whether you want to believe it or not, but this is the way it is. But that to me is, those are some immediate, other than kind of like, hey, your logbook can tell a lot, your hours. But as far as equipment goes, I mean, when you got multiple lights out, when you got multiple, you know, fluid leaks anywhere, or your brakes are out, or air leaks, I mean, there might be some stuff that would quickly shift your uh, approach as to where, I'm just going to do this quick walk around. And instead, you know what, now let me really take some time. But I'll tell you what my pet peeve was, or not really pet peeve, but I guess what I used to use as a, um, uh, I would use it as a measure to at what level or at what detail I was going to walk around a truck and trailer with. And it's one of the most overlooked items, and that's your permit book, your binder. When a driver handed me a binder that was clean, in order, the plastic sheets to protect the papers are all up to date, my approach was always kind of different. I was like, okay, let me kind of just walk around this truck and trailer. And again, if
Okay.
anything, yeah, that's exactly what I'm
I've
talking about
got
right
one
there.
here. I don't have the cover sheet yet because it's not done
Yeah,
yet, but
yeah, but
insurance,
that's insurance,
registration,
registration, inspection.
inspection.
If I was handed that book, I would not be doing a 45-minute level two. Uh, but it's when I got handed a manila folder with, if the licenses from 5 years ago, and an insurance card 3 years ago, that was always my approach, was with the mindset of, man, if you can't even take care of the paperwork, you're probably not taking care of the equipment. But that was one of mine, and that's not every DOT officer, but I'll tell you, that was mine. That was for me. I I used the appearance of the permit, the presentation of the permit book. That's what I always used as a kind of a gauge to see, like, well, let me see how hands on I'm going to get. And, I've always joked with the drivers, like, the reason you don't want someone at my height uh, having that approach is, I can fit in every orifice your truck and trailer have, as opposed to most of my partners who are 6'2" and 6'3", because I can squeeze in and look at a lot more stuff than they can. But that's what I used to use. Not everybody would, but that was mine. That's what I used. It wasn't how clean your truck was. I really just based it on the presentation of your permit book. And I was always impressed. Like, you talk about making an impression, is when, obviously, number one, have a great attitude, but then you look at the book, and, like, I'll tell you what, for me, always looked like, I was always super impressed. You take the book like yours there, and you got your logo, you got the truck number, you got your USDOT number, like identifying info, but just your logo, for me, like, it just looks awesome, man, especially if your logo is cool. Um, and then obviously you got everything in order, everything's up to date, you don't have a bunch of crumpled papers that's expired, it's not all dirty, it's not all torn, where you know that it's not being taken care of. That was always impressionable, man. And I've told this story several times, man, that, like, when I used to stop a lot of carriers, because where I was stationed in Del Rio, we had a lot of dedicated freight operation passing through, right? A lot of LA to Laredo, Laredo, LA, the two biggest import export lots in the US. So we would stop a lot of the similar carriers all the time. There's a carrier I used to stop, and I don't know if they're still around, but there's a carrier that was based. I used to stop a bunch of drivers based out of El Paso for a company called Stagecoach. And at one point, I had stopped so many, I actually called their terminal manager, because I was so impressed at how their drivers were always very professional, very courteous. Their stuff was always in order. It was very minimal to find violations on their equipment. And I just happened to call. I got told later on by one of the drivers that later on that year, and this might have been like 2010 or 11, um, they got like a Christmas bonus, and it was all because I called. Like, I called and just told them that, like, I appreciate how your drivers are. And the terminal manager was impressed, and he was very appreciative, and he showed it by giving them, I don't know what the bonus was, but I mean, it's something that was, out of the ordinary because one of their drivers actually told me about it.
Mm.
But then he shared it with them, and that's how I knew. Oh, it's because this guy called. Um, and but on the same spectrum, I also called terminal manager owners when I had the opposite approach. When you had a very belligerent driver and didn't want to be cooperative, I always called those owners too. And I tell them this, I tell them, hey, like, this is who I am. This is how your driver acted. And I just want you to be aware of this because this could be a problem for your company. And a lot of times they were very appreciative of those calls and took whatever action they needed to take.
Right. Well, driver attitude for sure. Over the years, I've learned, that gets you far. That either gets you farther ahead or gets you further behind. But one of my first audits, I believe. Now you can tell me if this was even the case or not. But one of my first audits in a previous company, I had a limo company, transportation business for 16 years
Yeah.
before this business, and I once my bus was put out of service. I was very young in business and at least in the DOT side of things. And the bus was put out of service because the emergency windows would not open. And I get it, super
The
safety
exits.
issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, the exits would not open. I don't know, somehow it was sealed. I bought the bus used and I never checked the emergency windows. Bus was put out of service. Find out the tow bill to tow that bus was $975 or something like that, just to tow it back to my yard. And when I talked to the cop on the phone, because he pulled my driver over and to tell me that, and I told him, I said, "Well, how much is the tow company paying you?" And he didn't like that very much. And I got a phone call probably about 3 weeks later from an auditor in Texas, and my company got audited. I don't know if there's like a way that you guys could red flag a business. That was the first time my company was ever pulled over. And I'm not asking you. I'm just kind of curious. Like, I think it was definitely the way I handled myself that night, and I talked to the police officer that really caused us to not only obviously get it was already going to get in, what do you call it, put out of service and everything, but that caused us to get audited.
Yeah, no, that's not true. There's complaints we can send, but they have to meet specific criteria. Like for example, uh, and this wouldn't happen very often, but say I pulled the driver over and I asked him like, "Hey, Josh, tell me what the process was to get hired on with this company, with this American AF like company. What was the process?" And every once in a while, I'd have a driver that tell me, like, "Well, the I know the owner. We've been friends since middle school, and he called me and asked me if I was still if still had my CDL, and I told him yeah, and he just told me to come on and start hauling some loads." So did you fill out an application? No, I didn't have to. And every so often, I do deeper and like, "Do you take a drug test?" No, I didn't have to. I didn't take a pre-employment. Like, all right, cool. Let's do your inspection. The other driver know at the end of that inspection, I was also, in addition to filling out his report, filling out a complaint form that the state would have us fill out, where I would send a generated uh, formal complaint to FMCSA, and I'd state in that complaint, Josh Roman of this company, American AF, US DOT number, during this roadside inspection, admitted to his company being in violation of Part 391 because they're not filling out applications, and they're also in violation of Part 382 because they're not doing pre-employment drug testing.
Mm.
And at some point, your company was going to receive a compliance review. So there's that. But the number one reason these days you get audited is you have just your scores go too high, your DOT scores, which is usually your maintenance. But that's the way, yeah. But to just file a complaint with Austin and say, "Hey, this guy hurt my feelings," like, no, man, that's not
That's
the way it was. It would have been for something specific, not something minor like that, dude. That's not correct.
well, we were again. This was 13 years ago, but yeah, it was. We got audited twice, and so the second time though, after that first time I got audited, I got hit for um, not keeping my driver's records when they worked for another company. That was new to me. So because I had obviously we used software. All my drivers were part time because we were a limo company. We were part time. All my guys worked on the weekends for the most part, and they had full time jobs. So my understanding was I got hit because I wasn't keeping my drivers' hours when they worked for the full time to make sure that they weren't going over the, what is it? I don't even know what it is. 70 hours a
Yeah,
week.
they're 70 or whatever, they're
Yeah.
whatever hours they're running.
So
Sure.
because I wasn't keeping track of that, so then after that we implemented a sheet where they had to fill out, 30 days, sheet where if they
Right.
worked for their other job, they put it down how many hours they worked for my job, they still wrote it down, and they filled it out every single month, and we had to keep that on file.
Right.
But there's so many different things. Let me ask you: has there ever been a truck that you've come across or a driver that you've come across that you could not find something on?
Yeah, a lot of
Okay.
times.
Because that's a big myth. A lot of guys, including me,
Big
sometimes think
myth.
that no matter
Yeah,
what you do or no matter what we do, that you guys are
no.
always going to find something on us.
Man, I'll tell you straight up, dude. HEB trucks, Coca-Cola trucks, Budweiser, as much crap as they get, Swift, Werner,
Okay.
Landstar, you won't find anything. You may not. It may be different with the driver, but their equipment immaculate. You don't stop them, man. JB Hunt, Knight, Stevens.
American AF.
I don't know about. I didn't. Well, American AF I wasn't anywhere near, but no, man. That yeah. If dude, I did that multiple times. If they didn't have violations, they didn't have violations. There's that other myth that like we have to find something wrong. That's not true. If you don't have anything wrong, you don't have anything wrong. Um, I certainly understand why that mindset exists because there are some DOT officers, including troopers, that think that way, but it's not the majority. That's the hard part, just like do I believe every driver doesn't pre-trip? No, but there's the exceptions, and that's the same thing for us. Is yeah, there are some inspectors that believe they have to, and I kind of found that, man. I think everybody very similarly has that approach when you come out of all the schools because you're kind of really gung ho and um, you you want to be as effective as and knowledgeable as you can. So you do try to show that you're looking more thorough. But after a while, and I think for the most part, everybody goes through this. After a while, doing it long enough, you distinguish the difference between someone who's blatantly trying to get away and then someone who's just trying. And it took me about maybe 3 years, and then that's when my approach changed. Is I could easily tell, like, your company's either trying to run as cheap as you can and getting away as cheap as possible, or a company that's really trying, but they have some issues. I was always way harder on the cheap ones because I knew that's what their mentality was: is I can afford it, I just don't want to spend it. And but it takes you a little bit of time to be able to see the difference between the two. There was a lot of times, man, that uh, I and this was always a lot with local drivers because you just get to know them so much.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of local drivers at times, and even if they weren't local, if they had a great attitude, man, if I popped them and their truck was overweight, I'd give them a ticket, a citation, right? I'd write them a ticket for it because by DPS policy, if any axle or group of axles was over 1,000 pounds, you have to write a ticket. You write a ticket for that. There's a lot of times I wrote someone a ticket, and then after the camera was off, I'd go pull them back out and say, "Hey, like, just so you know, man, I'm not gonna turn this into the judge's office. So I need to get the stat for my report for my stats for the week, but I'm not going to turn it into the judge. So don't worry about paying. And like if the judge if your company's probably going to wonder, hey, they're calling the judge, and the judge is going to keep saying, well, I never got the ticket. It's because I'm telling you, I'm not going to turn it in.
Really?
But I did that as a favor, and once I don't turn it in, it's not going to affect their record anyway because it's not being turned in. So yeah, I did that, dude. But that was based on the attitude the drivers had. It was if they were cool, even though they had this violation, like, man, dude, you're at 1,200 pounds over this axle. I gotta write you a ticket for it. But you know what, man? Because of how cool and badass you were with me, I'm not gonna turn it into the judge. I did that numerous times, man. Numerous times. that I can admit now because I've been gone for 13 years. And I wouldn't
Sure.
have said that back then. But yeah, that's the approach. I had that approach, man. And yeah, there was a lot of times if I pulled you over and you just didn't have anything wrong. I mean, I'd like, hey, you're good. I'll tell you a funny story. There was several times that I would have drivers that I tell them, hey, man, like, I checked you out. You're good. You ain't got nothing wrong. Let me go just type this up. And they'd be happy, right? Because their company have some kind of recognition program where if they get a clean level one or two, they would get like a $50 bonus or $100 bonus. And they would tell me that. And then jokingly, I'd say, they say, oh man, I just made $100 bonus. I'm like, oh, you mean $50 bonus? They look at me kind of puzzled, like, no, no, they give us 100. I'm like, well, yeah, but but you wouldn't have got this if I didn't pull you over, right? And then they would kind of finally click in their head, like, oh, but obviously it was as a joke. But yeah, I wrote several clean inspections over the years, man. If you didn't have anything wrong, you didn't have anything wrong, and that should be recognized. Those guys that do have that mindset of I have to put something on here, they don't belong in uniform. They don't belong on the on the commercial vehicle side for sure because that's not the approach you're supposed to have.
Okay, and one last question because this is good. We could talk for hours, man. And honestly, I'd like
Sure.
to invite you back. I know we talked earlier a little bit about live stream. I would like to run a live stream as well with you because I know there's going to be a ton of questions if you have
Right.
time. But
Yeah. Sure.
because I know I value your time for sure. But one last question, and this is just me personally. Again, want to know the stickers that they issue sometimes if you do pass, right? They'll get a sticker. They usually they'll put
The
a
CBSA
little
sticker.
sticker on your, yeah. Um,
Right.
if you are driving by and you see that you don't visibly see anything, is that literally like a get out jail free card? Like you won't mess with it. You just keep on going.
No. No. What? So the only time you can get issued one of those CVSA stickers is during a you have to have a level one that you pass with no critical violations, and the only thing it generally exempts you from having another level one done for whatever time period that sticker is still good for. Usually about 3 months is like you just don't need to have another level one for the next 3 months. But here's the kicker: it doesn't mean that we can't reinspect you if there was some obvious reason that it needed to have an inspection. But generally, you wouldn't be subject to another level one. But with the same thinking, if you have a truck and trailer that gets a sticker on the truck, sticker on the trailer, the next time you come through the scale house, you have the same truck but a different trailer. Then I can still level one because you got a different trailer. But I wouldn't do the level one on the truck. I'd just be doing it. I could do a level one on the trailer if I wanted to, but usually they're probably gonna just do a level two because it's if you're gonna do level one, you're more than likely gonna do the truck and trailer together.
Gotcha.
But if your truck's still good, however, like I said, it doesn't mean that you just can't be re-inspected. You're just not subject to getting another level one, and that's why you kind of this mindset has been like, oh well, if I got the stickers, I just can't get inspected. No, that's not the way it works. Yeah, so that's what that sticker means. And then the other problem, they only have so many stickers that they would issue us, and like say for example, between me and my five partners, they might give us each like 8 stickers or 10 stickers,
Hmm.
and if you issue them all out and they're the same stickers for an entire 3 month period, you may run out of stickers. So you would have got one, but I don't have any. I can't issue one. So then you would tell the driver, hey, make a copy of this inspection and carry it with you, because then if they try to level one you again, just show them that we actually did it. So there's that scenario too. You won't always get a sticker, and I just wanted to be clear on that. And not because you didn't pass, it's because they don't give us that many, so they may just run out.
I lied. I got one more question. Is is there? I know the big companies that I used to work with, as far in the limousine industry, they would call out sometimes an inspector to come out to their property to to voluntarily uh, inspect their trucks. Is there a service like that we can call that would come out to us and do it? And if they find something, not report it or
When I was in, and I'm gonna guess it's probably the same way. DPS didn't allow us to do that.
No.
And obviously for the liability, where now I'm a non-employee on your company property, and even though I'm an officer, um, there has uh, there's a workaround to it, but generally no, you can't go do level inspections in somebody's yard. They do that at times with like buses, but
Mhm.
it'll be at a like a in the parking lot of like a stadium or something. Um, but to do it privately, no, they won't do, as far as I know, because and I'm gonna guess they probably haven't changed that policy. What they will do though is you can reach out to your local office and ask them, hey, can you send a trooper to my next safety meeting, and they can, they can walk around. They can kind of give the drivers a 1 hour, instruction or something like that. It's usually not going to be all day long, but it'll be something where they spend an hour or two. And I mean, I do that all the time, but for me, there's no time restriction, because I mean, I'm private, as opposed to them where they got still their routine duty and stuff they got to do. Um, the other problem came, I think it was last year. Yeah, I believe it was like maybe sometime last year. There was a California Highway Patrol sergeant that sent a petition to CVSA and wanted them to write into, I believe it's the policy for selection of vehicles. I'm not sure, but in one of the CVSA policies, which is actually what governs the inspection process, he wanted it to be in literature that inspectors shouldn't do volunteer inspections, and they agreed with him.
Mm.
They wrote it into the CVSA policy that CVA inspectors are not to conduct volunteer inspections because doing inspections isn't a the way they worded it was something to the effect of like it's not a it's not a way to judge how good your maintenance program is. I didn't agree with it because if you're coming into the scale house and you volunteer for inspection, as long as I approach the inspection just like I would if I pulled you over roadside, where I'm not going to show you any favoritism, I'm not going to show you any leniency, I don't see what the problem is. But what was happening is, and this was just on this was the fault of the inspectors, is you had these scale houses that were doing level ones or level twos on the same vehicles all the time, and they're starting to get a bunch of clean inspections, which is the way it brings your numbers down. That's the reason you volunteer.
Right.
But that I blame the inspectors for that, because if you know that just last month you did a level two on the same truck and trailer, why are you doing it again? And it's all public, so you can see that. Like we have the system just like the SMS where you can see the last time the vehicle was inspected, and so that to me was their own fault. But if you still volunteered at a scale house, if they still inspected you, I don't see that being an issue as long as they're not showing you any leniency. But technically, by CVSA policy, they're not supposed to do any volunteer inspections anymore. One of the workarounds I had, and this was way before because this was just something implemented last year, but when I was still in uniform, I knew that we were prohibited from doing that. So I would tell an owner like you, okay, hey Josh, well, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to be working out on this highway, and if your trucks happen to pass by, maybe I'll take a look at them. So it was kind of an indirect way for me to still be able to inspect your stuff, but to have like a full level two or level one done in your yard, like that's not happening. They may do a demonstration inspection for like safety training, but they're not going to do the inspections in your yard.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, Santiago, I appreciate your time, man. Wealth of
Yeah.
knowledge, man, and yeah, you're painting a lot of myth, or you're getting rid of a lot of myths that a lot of guys always talk about, and but you're also kind of confirming some things that we all kind of know, especially the pre-inspection, how important that is. I know myself, we've got a piece of paper that we do, but I think we got to crack down ourselves. So I might even call you and be like, hey, I might have to see what we can do crack down and make it a little bit more,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. There's, yeah. And I'm
it's a lot
gonna,
more important than that.
yeah, sure, man. And like I told you before we jumped on, is here soon I'm gonna post way more long form YouTube videos where I actually do explain uh, inspections in detail. Um, and it would be component systems at a time, because otherwise, they'd be 30 minutes long where I explain it. But I think that's if I can help the drivers and the carriers have a reference to help their drivers understand that and be able to watch it multiple times, as opposed to me coming and doing a 2 or 4 hour training like I've been asked to do in these private meetings. I'd rather them be able to, you know, watch a video multiple times, where if I'm talking about the extinguisher and everything that's checked with the extinguisher, and then quoting the regulation underneath so you can see exactly what it is, serves two purposes. One, shows the driver what the inspector is gonna look for, and two, prevents them from being written up for something that they shouldn't be written up for,
Right.
because it's not covered in the regulation. um, and I think that's where I can probably that's definitely where I can make a bigger impact overall, because I'm not going to get everybody to come to class or hire me to do a private training, even though if you want me to, hit me up and I will. um, but that's I think you need to have multiple, like you have this information has to be repetitive. You're not going to get it the first time. Even in these trainings that I've done, even with my own students, I tell them that I can't teach you what I've been doing for 20 years in 3 days. You got to take the initiative on your own to go back and read and do the exercises. And then if it's the inspection, go back and read your material. This is what we talked about when it came to the steering components. This is what we talked about when it came to the brake system. You're not going to remember everything in that walk around that we do for 4 or 5 hours. You got to go back and refresh yourself. But
Yep.
when they don't have when they don't have the ability to see it and have it explained, it's kind of hard, man, because you're not going to memorize what I talked about in 3 days. However, if I post a video on solely the fire extinguisher and the triangles and everything else, then you can watch it multiple times, go read it in where it says it in regulation, and then maybe hopefully it sticks with you the next time you're pulled over, where you can also use that as tact and say, hey, isn't this not a violation? And that's something you talked about at the expo at the very end, right? Was like, can you approach it? Can you ask a DOT about it? Can you question, right, an inspection? I said, yeah, you can. Just make sure to use some tact. Don't come off with the attitude that you're trying to just prove them wrong, because you're not going to win. You're not going to win against the government. Just be use some tact. And I had that happen, probably a handful of times, where a driver would say, "Hey, is this actually a violation?" Oh, you know what? Now I think about it, yeah, it's not.
Yep.
Um, but that person has to have the humbleness to have that approach, and not like some of them do, where you're not gonna correct me. This is what it is, and this is my highway, and you're on my highway. And I know, dude, I know those guys are out there. Those are the guys I didn't like working with, because I knew that they were giving the rest of us a bad name.
Right.
Just like I couldn't judge the industry based on one driver, you can't judge all of enforcement based on one DOT officer that you have a horrible encounter with. That's not how the majority of them are. And I know, because I mean I was on that side, so I know it's not all of them. Like, trust me.
Sure. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and tag your social media channels in the description below. If you guys are interested in following Santiago, go ahead and give him a follow, give him a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to his channel. Like he said, he's gonna be bringing out a ton of good info, and hopefully this will be the first of many times or several times that you see him on the channel here and helping our industry, because he is somebody that would be good to have on our side to really help us learn how to do things the right way. Santiago, thank you for your time, brother. I appreciate you, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you again for coming out to the expo, and hopefully we can have you come back next year again as well, because I think you were definitely people were really well engaged when you were talking, and I think they got a lot of good information out of you.
Yeah, dude, I was really surprised, man. I was being 100% honest when I said like I didn't think I was surprised at the amount of people that were listening. I didn't expect I was gonna be happy with 5 people listening, but to see like the majority of the seats full and then I told you where I only printed 40 inspections because 40 of the presentations because I didn't think there was gonna be that many. And then when I look at you, you got the box in your hand that I gave you, and it's empty. And I'm like, oh wow, I guess I underestimated, but yeah, it was fun, man. And and then having the line of people after was also surprising. I mean, I knew why they wanted to talk to Keaton, right? Because he's the TV guy. But to have like people waiting almost an hour just to talk to me afterwards was like crazy, man. And it's funny because in my mind I'm like, all right, I'll be off the stage at the 10:45 or 11. I'm on the road, and dude, I ended up staying like an hour and 15 after from everybody that wanted to chat. But no, it was fun, man. And thanks for inviting me again, and thanks for bringing me on the to talk to this to talk about this stuff. And but yeah, anytime you want me to come back on, man, just let me know and we'll make it happen again.
Awesome, sounds good, man. We'll
All right,
talk. Appreciate it.
all right, brother. Appreciate it.